Network members joining this webinar called Labor Mobility Push and Pull Factors. Maybe some of you have already read the Western Balkan Barometer, which shed light on a concerning trend, a growing apprehension regarding depopulation across the region, but that's even broader than Western Balkan. Notably, 44% of respondents now express intentions to relocate abroad, marking a 5% increase from the previous year, with an alarming of 71% of young individuals contemplating emigration. Efforts to mitigate population decline through labor mobility initiatives have yielded subpar results. Consequently, countries are exploring strategies to repatriate their diaspora and retain skilled individuals with assistance from development partners. This underscores an urgent challenge that our regional advocacy network and its affiliates are committed to address from a policy and advocacy standpoint. To this end, I would like to thank you all the experts, high-level policymakers, researchers, practitioners, development actors who have joined our webinar and have been willing to contribute with their expertise and thoughts in around 2 hours of labor mobility push and pull factors webinar. This webinar will be registered. Hopefully that is okay to be recorded. If there is any complaint, please just write us in the chat. It's organized in 2 parts. In the first part, we will hear real-life stories around which the webinar will be framed. In the second part, experts will provide their insights from Serbia, Kosovo, and Bosnia-Herzegovina, but broader from Western Balkan. Then we'll have in the third part reactions from policymakers, researchers, development actors, practitioners to the policy recommendations provided from experts in the second part of this webinar, and all of you will have the chance to address questions to both panel speakers. We've invited at the end experts to share the takeaways, and we'll update you with more activities from Regional Advocacy Network Western Balkan in the upcoming months. Say this, if there is no special concern or remark, I would like to pass the floor to the 2 first speakers, Regis Blanc, who is our migration advisor in Helvetas, Switzerland, and afterwards to Jona Liceza, who is a private sector representative and is going to share the perspective on behalf of this sector located in Albania. Regis, the floor for you.
Thank you, Valbona, and good afternoon, everyone. As you say, I have the honor to set the scene, let's say. So I'm going to provide a very general introduction about the topic. So as you know, migration is a global reality. It has been a livelihood strategy for human beings on all continents for centuries. Individuals and communities have always moved in reaction to shocks in search of improved living conditions, to rejoin family, or in response to opportunities, including work opportunities. So we can say that migration and development are very linked to human history. And as we know, migration can make a substantial contribution to economic development and poverty reduction, but it also involves some difficulties and risk. So in a nutshell, migration entails both benefits and costs for the migrants, the origin countries, and the destination countries. So on the one hand, migrants often bring skills, dynamism, and resources that strengthen destination economies. In many cases, they also strengthen the country of origin, providing vital support for communities by sending remittances and also stimulating the domestic labor markets through the investment, the innovation, the sharing of knowledge and so on, brought back by diaspora communities. And on the other side of the coin, without going into details about the challenges faced by some migrants across the world regarding working and living conditions, such as discrimination, abuses, xenophobia, and so on, migration can also negatively affect communities in area of origin through brain drain and loss of workforce. So this is one of the key issues that bring us together today, which is, by the way, very relevant for the Western Balkan region, but also for many other regions in the world. Usually, economics tend to address the potential of migration through the match between migrant skills and related attributes and destination countries' needs. This is supposed to shape the extent to which migrants, countries of origin and countries of destination gain from migration. The stronger the match, the larger the gains. However, this, let's call it match framework, is valid for origin countries such as Western Balkan countries if they successfully manage migration for development. And of course, it tends to be far from straightforward, as it will be explained by our rich panel of participants today. And experts say that this is valid for countries of origin if they make labor migration an explicit part of their development strategy, if they also lower the remittance costs, if they, for example, also facilitate the engagement of diaspora, build skills in high demand globally, protect their national while abroad, etc. So we can call it a kind of mammoth task. But Western Balkan countries, sorry, are engaged on these different issues, which aim to better leverage the potential of migration. And on the other side of the coin, I mean the cost of migration, such as depopulation. It's also important to bear in mind or to highlight that out-migration or emigration is often a symptom, rather a cause of underlying structural problems. And Western Balkan countries are also addressing these different problems or different challenges by, for example, improving governance quality and strengthening institutions, as well as improving economic opportunities in working on the demand and on the supply. So I'm personally looking forward to hearing all these diversified and valuable insights shared by these different participants today. The evolution of our societies, in particular with regard to globalization and demographic change, including aging societies, makes migrations always more important. And this reality requires a lot of things. But if I may, I would just like to share one reflection as a conclusion of this introduction. Migration is very complex. It's not helpful to adopt a simplistic view regarding the topic. For example, migration is not a threat to development, but is neither the silver bullet of development. So this observation leads me to the following question. Shall we have to oppose brain drain and brain gain? Are these not part of the same, let's call it, coin? And if we want to tilt the coin towards more benefit than costs, what reform, what policies are needed, what action are needed to make progress on this? So I'm sure that today's discussion will help us to reflect on this question and also help us to select the most relevant action. So thank you for inviting me, Valbona, and the network. And now I'm giving the floor to Jona, which gonna share with us a very concrete and stimulating case study. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Jona, we hear you very well.
Okay,
floor for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Valbona, and thank you all Helvetas and all the partners for this opportunity. It's a pleasure and it's an honor for me to be part of this forum, and I really hope that the case study, the story that I'm about to tell you, will be helpful and will be guiding you further in your discussions. Unfortunately, I can give you only a small window of information what we have experienced, although it's a long experience, but it's a rather singular one, and it's a singular case as well. We chose the case study of an enterprise located in Shkodra. It's called Shqipëria Tricot. It's the local producer, and at the same time, it's the branch of the Italian undergarment maker Cotonella. You might have heard it. It's pretty much a medium-sized business in terms of Italy market. It's around 30 to 40 million euros turnover annually. In Albania and in Shkodra especially, it's a very well-known name because it has been present here and it employs more than 1,000 people, and it has been present for now almost 30 years. And that's why for us it means more than probably to someone else in Italy. It's, however, relevant. We believe it was relevant for our case because it's an FDI, and it's also a labor-intense industry at the same time. And I believe that the challenges that you are discussing today have been experienced by the company as well. I'll give you a very brief history. I mean, you can see in the slides more details. I don't want to take your time, but pretty much is divided into two important moments. What went well for the first 10 years, so to say, or 10 to 15 years, and then the downward slope. What happened and how it was reflected in, especially in the employment aspect. We believed, just one fragment I would like to share is that in the beginning, when it started, we all thought that it was an employer branding problem, that the industry that employs people, labor-intense industries, pretty much do not have a good reputation. And in the beginning, we thought it was an employer branding more than a systemic problem. And with the years, we saw that it was a systemic problem, very much affected by labor migration and inability to change cycles of production to adapt. And we also saw that we were unprepared to deal with the problem. This company specifically, but in my opinion, also the entire industry. Okay. Now, Cotonella settled in Albania in 1995 for basically two major reasons they say were the highlight of their decision: the favorable economic conditions of the time and the low the trademark is the low labor cost. And it was very similar, especially the Shkodra region. It was very culturally similar to them because most of the population at the time spoke Italian. You can see now that it has completely shifted as a percentage. At the time, Cotonella produced in Serbia, in Romania a lot, Albania, and in Italy. In 2001, after having experienced a growth in productivity and it saw Albania as a reliable partner, the company employed up to 450 people and produced 10 to 12 million items per year. It was more than 70% of their production, of their total product component. At this time, the company settled in Albania decided to outsource production. And what they did, it was a very new and I might say a daring move. They took the people that were their collaborators and gave them the opportunity to set up their own production units, and created at the same time 5 locally owned entrepreneurs of the sector. And these are up to date are their main suppliers for labor. What are For labor intense processes, basically. We stitch and we do the packaging and everything else for them. In 2008, it decides to completely delocalize. It doesn't produce anything else except for in Albania. It opens a branch here, building a very high, a very big, let's say, structure, of almost 10 million euros investment, including the technology. And at this point, it employs Cotonella on its own, 78 people. So basically, production is spread into 5 contractors, and Cotonella itself brings all the processes in Shkodra, starting from cutting, logistics, production, distribution, planning, warehousing, quality control, everything. And what remains at headquarters in Italy at this point, it's only sales and procurement and the creative division. At this moment, it was a peak for them, although at that time the Italian market crisis started. They produced at least 16 million pieces of intimate wear per year. And it was also affected a lot by the Italian market, the crisis, the financial crisis in Europe, and especially how it hit Italy. However, they were able to recover. They had some good years in terms of production. We also had few problems with as regarded to labor mobility or turnover. And then you can see here that from 2017 to 2023, I think the data is okay, but pretty much the idea is the same. The minimum wage increased from, let's say, 200 euro at the time, because also the exchange rate was different, to now 400 euros, from 24,000 lek to 40,000 lek, which is about 66% more increase. And this is a statutory minimum wage. However, it was not reflected in productivity. So producers were having costs and productivity was not improved. In 2014, Cotonella decides to source full cycle productions in so basically to contract other producers to produce for them. They had just provided the design, and then they do everything else for them in China and in India, because they saw that for other products that they wanted to introduce in the market, not the typical undergarments that we had the expertise, but for example, pajamas and other kinds of light outerwear, Albania was not prepared to produce for them. And at this point, since this moment, we have started to see a shift, and they have started to produce in China and in India. Then, of course, it's worth mentioning the COVID crisis and all the years that followed. And now, pretty much, it produces from 16 million, which was at its peak, only 8.5 million pieces of undergarments are produced in Albania. They remain in Shkodra. In 2023, Cotonella does the same exercise that it did in 1995. It delocalizes in Uzbekistan, replicating the same model with the perspective to build its branch in the next 10 years, probably, to build its branch not in Shkodra anymore, but in Uzbekistan. Now they have a limited practice. They have 2 production lines. It's a very limited production quantity also. But they say that they see it as a very favorable market for 2 main reasons. One is the labor cost that, according to the data that they have provided us, it's at $20 the monthly average. They report high productivity from the workers, but Uzbekistan in itself has an advantage because it's an economy that does have quite some know-how and production capacity also for the raw material. So this might have been another interesting component in their decision making. We believe that in the next 10 to 15 years, there will be no more of this industry. The typical way that this industry operates in Shkodra, it's not likely to continue. What we believe that worked at the time in its peak years were the fiscal stimuli for importation and renewal of technology. Of course, there was a lot of know-how being introduced in the Albanian market. Not only the stitching, the basic textile procedures, but also other processes like logistics and quality control and recognition of also structures of suppliers and cutting technologies and everything. They were all unknown to us. So I believe that even if there were problems before, the governments would be more highly motivated to interfere to improve the situation. Whereas now, having low numbers, I don't think it's an attractive industry also to save anymore. But this is my personal opinion. There was, of course, the low labor cost, and there were no restrictions of minimum wage. This is for sure. And we believe also another thing to be important to highlight for you is that at the time there was quite some high productivity from the workers. The average age was 28 years old, and today in the entire industry, and I believe this is throughout the Balkans as a data, but for us it's 100% like this. The medium age is 42 years old. Not we see that there is not only depopulation. This is of course an important factor, but we also see that there is no interest or availability of the young age to engage in this industry. And while it's a very good indicator of social economical development, it created a huge vacuum in the industry that we were not able to address. I would like to add here that I was not keen on writing it because I don't have enough data, but a lot of similar suppliers have experimented with foreign labor from Nepal, I think, from Bangladesh, and another South Asian country. I don't remember the name. It does not seem to be working what they report, at least in the industry, for two reasons. The high costs, because they do have quite high costs, regardless of how it's marketed. And the other thing that kept me from writing this in the presentation is that I believe that there is a lot of informality in this sector. So basically, the numbers that they have might be bigger and not reported. So I'm not sure what to say on the topic, but it seems not to be working so well. And also the bureaucratic aspects are quite important in this process. What we believe, and this is, I will be the shortest on this part, what we believe that could help the sector and what we aim to do in the next 10 to 15 years to salvage this industry in Shkodra, at least the companies involved, we believe that there should be specialization and that vocational schools related to textile should add more middle management positions, know-how of middle management positions, and create technicians that know how to work with textile, not only at the basic stitching level, but also for cutting and modeling and all the cycles involved. And this also brings me to the fact that the sector should move on to full process manufacturing, and the rest, I don't know. Probably we should advertise more, and the government should consider fiscal stimuli. Although, in my personal belief, I don't see how they can do more, at least in the case of Albania. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iona. Thank you very much. I hope this has inspired and triggered different ideas how a sector could raise and experiences a sort of status quo and what sort of policies have worked out or are recommendable to be set in place. Now, after this case study, I would like to shift to three colleagues, Nermin Oruk from Bosnia-Herzegovina, Mihailo Djukic from Serbia, and Alban Hashani from Kosovo, who will dive us through three important topics. Nermin will share his views about the pros and cons and implications of migration, not only from Bosnia-Herzegovina perspective, but broader for the Western Balkan, and what are some policy recommendations to cope with them. Mihailo will focus on good practices and the way how diaspora could be used to face such complex issues, and Alban will focus on building an sustainable economic growth model by considering migration. So let me pass the floor to colleagues, and meanwhile feel free to use the chat for any comment or question. We'll have the chance to address them at a later stage. Nermin, floor for you.
Thank you very much, Valbona. Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to participate for the first time in this networks event. I hope it won't be the last one. Well, I'll try to present as introduced, say, a challenging task to cover the most, say, pressing issues, the variety of labor mobility trends and policies. But let me just, with something what I believe is possible within this time frame, focus on specific trends, challenges, and possible policy solutions for skilled labor mobility, which for me as a labor economist is of particular importance, and I'm maybe a bit biased at. Just to say, to make sure that I'm, presenting key points for as food for thought for further discussion, hopefully respecting the, the time slot allocated to me. I will not really deeply discuss and provide evidence and arguments for some statements I will make, but I'm available for discussion, as already said, for any questions, for clarifications in the chat. Just for the sake of contextualization and for reminding us, I'm sharing some charts. The slide 11 chart on the stock of immigrants from the country suggests that we have, increasing stock, increasing immigration from the country, and immigration as an important policy issue for all the countries in the region. We can see from the data, this one and the other data shared region is predominantly a region of immigration, and despite some recent trends of increased immigration inflows, still the immigration is dominant. The net migration is negative. On the next slide, we can see the allocation of or distribution per country of destination, which suggests that particularly for Bosnia and Montenegro, intra-regional migration is important, considerable, and other countries have, say, also important share of the intra-regional migration. Still, say, some of the data can be hidden in the dual citizenship and other arrangements. The third slide is pointing towards the drivers or the factors, so the reasons for migration. I think for any policy discussion and policy design, it's really important to understand complexity of migration decision process and the complex set of an interaction of different drivers and factors that determine migration flows, at least those at macro and meso level that need to be understood in order to be properly addressed. This is just an example of a specific sectoral analysis of IT sector and health sector immigration from Bosnia, suggesting that we really have in recent year increased shift from the usual suspect of wage differences to more subtle factors, including social, political, but also environmental ones, just to be taken into account in the discussion of possible policy responses. We can say that this shift towards, say, a higher order Maslow hierarchy needs also produces positive self-selection of migrants, meaning that more skilled are more likely to emigrate. And despite something that we can see on the next slide, despite some positive changes, we still positive effects of immigration very often dominating narrative on migration and discussion about remittances, influence, diaspora contribution. We still need to point out and take into consideration negative consequences, such as the population discharge shows the changes and decrease in population between two censuses in different countries, just showing the considerable negative effect in all countries except some minor positive changes in Montenegro. So I think that it's important, and the reason for focus on skilled immigration is that with this immigration we really have increased skills gaps and skill mismatches that result in decreased competitiveness of the industries of the region, the economies of the region, and then increase pressures for introduction of migration policies to attract much needed labor force from abroad, which again brings some additional challenges for migration policies, including social cohesion and so on. Next slide on remittances shows that, yes, remittances are really important, and it's often dominate the policy discussion and even research agenda, but they are often promoted as foreign currency larger than development assistance and foreign direct investments. I often say, in my presentation that for me, the more appropriate question is why development assistance and FDIs are lower than remittances. The reason is that it seems to me that this expectations of benefits of migration through remittances is driving lack of retention policies or even support of migration, and this can be shown through some policies of bilateral labor migration employment arrangements with Western European countries, which actually result in even deepening of the skills gap existing in these countries. In addition, remittances diaspora seem to be something like, as I wrote in some papers, a new development mantra. However, we don't really see, successful examples of policies introduced to engage diaspora in development. So in next slide, out of these, as defined, 6 are groups of policies defined by Professor Lowell. I would like to stress 4 of these that are particularly relevant for skilled migration and also given the current policy challenges in the region, and also drawing from some experiences of recent consultancy projects on redesigning migration policies outside this region. So the first group the retention policies refers to previously shown drivers of migration that are related to political instability, corruption, lack of merit-based employment and promotion, quality of education. We need to be aware that education is really driving immigration, because people have intention to pursue their own or to offer better education for their children. So for the retention, I think improving quality of education is very important and would have additional positive impacts on return as well as recruitment or attracting foreign students and academics and other people. For return specifically, I think we need to think of designing appropriate policies to remove obstacles and attract our migrants as one of the sources of foreign labor force. Some kind of immigration policies, but focused on our citizens, living abroad instead of people from other countries. It might be more effective policies. Resourcing refers to creating mechanism for this famous diaspora development nexus. I won't go into many details of it because next panel will cover it. But the research I was involved in really shows that we lack appropriate mechanisms for involvement of diaspora. Finally, for the recruitment, we have some examples of attraction, some examples of labor market integration of migrants. But what I would like to stress here is that policies to retain already present foreign labor force may be easier to implement rather than attraction policies. I'm talking about skilled workers who are currently in these countries as transit migrants, and we don't see policies of their integration. But also this can be extended to students, and in this understanding of skilled immigration in the broader sense of talent policies, we need to think of attracting business persons, entrepreneurs, and other types of talents. Recent changes in immigration policies in the EU and UK shows that quota system fully based on this identification of immigrants as skilled people is not necessarily effective, and the policies such as talent partnership, particularly ones with a more proactive role of destination countries, are more likely to succeed, particularly in the context of this so-called global race for talent. And this is something to be considered by the countries in the region. In the final slide, I have to, as a researcher, emphasize the need for evidence. If we intend to design appropriate, effective migration policies, we need evidence. In our case, we don't really understand, why people come, why people go, and some specific sectoral analysis, as the one I presented, that really attempt to understand some sector-specific drivers would help in designing appropriate policies. For diaspora, for utilization of their potential, we need to know much better who our diaspora is, where they are, how they can and how they wish to contribute, etc. For return and attraction policies, we need to design targeted schemes for skills needed in our labor market. Precondition for this is that we know what are our skills need. We don't really have appropriate estimates and skills anticipation, skills needs on the labor markets. We don't have such data and evidence. And something I was recently involved in Turkey is that I would like to point out, final note, that for both improving evidence, but also for improving migration management, we need to explore options for using new technologies such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, big data, and so on, which are really, adaptation of, policy design to the new world, we could say. And also the policies need to be evaluated and redesigned regularly because, as we often hear, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, at least the ones officially claimed by policymakers in our region. So I would close this with a, say, call to do something, saying this brief description of the current context, the trends really suggest that we need to seriously consider adaptation of current migration policies, and it should be done better today than tomorrow. I hope I'm in time. Thank you very much.
Yes, Mihailo, floor for you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So, dear Valbona, dear colleagues, thank you for this initiative and facilitation of the event covering such an important topic. I'm happy to provide some contributions, some insights based on my previous research and particularly related to the assessment and formulation of public policies and measures that could support local economic development. And diaspora, I would say, perfectly fits into that context. Economic engagement of diaspora should be an important element of these policies. So I will focus on diaspora economic engagement and relevant policy measures, but we'll also try to provide some examples of good and promising practices. The presentation will be structured into three main topics. First one would be the role of diaspora in local economic development potentials. Then I will cover some state of play elements, and finally some future direction hints, I would say. So first of all, as we could already see from the previous presentations and specially presented figures, so diaspora represents an important development resource. It is because of its size relative to the population in the country of origin, traditionally emigration countries. It's due to financial capacity. It's also because of the knowledge and skills concentrated. And based on many research findings, and I would say also abundant literature, theoretical and applied research at the global level, diaspora could help Western Balkans in many different ways. Of course, to boost investments, and this is often mentioned as very important for economic growth. We need investments, we need foreign investments, and diaspora is often considered as important source of capital. Of course, it would also strengthen economic relationships, ties of the country of origin with some critical international markets. And as we all know, most of our diaspora members live in high-income countries. And this is something that we always take into account. Also, given the undermined reputation of the countries in the region, let's say that diaspora members sometimes play the role of ambassadors and trying to would improve the reputation of the country of origin in the eyes of let's say international community and business especially. And finally, diaspora could be a knowledge source, and transfer of knowledge could, of course, improve social capital, and this is also an important element. Of course, as Nermin already elaborated in more details, remittances are very often associated with the diaspora and the diaspora economic engagement. This is not unexpected. This is not surprising, because these are, I mean, showed in absolute figures, but of course, when we speak about relative figures, for example, in Serbia, you have 7 to 8% of GDP accounts for remittances. This is considerable. In smaller economies, in Bosnia, I believe it's even more, maybe 9 or 10. And for smaller economies, I think in Kosovo is 18, if I recall well, 18% of GDP, which is very, very, very high. And only some estimates that I found, only 10 or even less than 10% of these remittances are going to investments. So they are basically, they are stable source of capital, which is good. They're pretty much independent from the government policy, but most of these are based on let's say personal relationships and going into some kind of social support. So the second thing I wanted to highlight here is state of play, current policy aspects of diaspora economic engagement, and this is very important. There are some stereotypes regarding diaspora, as you know, as Balkan countries are aiming to catch up with the developed world. We are always searching for some shortcuts, for some magical sticks, and then some overnight success. And diaspora fits into that logic in several ways. This is so typical, and notion of diaspora is often considered as a magic stick in public discourse. We had some TV shows depicting diaspora members, you know, the guy coming from abroad with a bag full of money, and his or her relatives are there, and they're spending the money even before they know that the money exists. And there was also some in Bosnia TV show about the 3 ethnic groups during the war conflict, and you know they're trying to attract some diaspora money to take advantage over another in a war conflict that will solve our problem, and we will, thanks to our diaspora capital, we will be stronger if compared to our let's say enemies. So the diaspora in general is full of this type of stereotypes, has been, but and diaspora economic engagement policies sometimes lacked systemic approach. This is true, and as any other policies, there is no overnight success, and we need continuity, we need rational perspective, and if economic interests are in the focus, then it should be based more on interest than identity. It was, let's say, more identity focused over the previous decades. But there's some encouraging trends, as I would say, growing focus on businesses, on business associations, and we could notice that in some research that have been conducted over the last years. So I was a part of the team within ICMPD project, and who conducted some research. It was under Link Up 2 initiative, and we identified in the Balkans so about 200 practices, both good and promising practices, and some of them are surprisingly not so visible, and they show very, very interesting examples of diaspora members who return to the Western Balkans and set up a business or both, or there's also some co-development initiatives, and this is something that should be probably more promoted also in the country of origin. So what are in general, yeah? Sorry. Okay, I will continue.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so
may we kindly ask someone to speak? Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So what are in general barriers and for reaching greater attention of diaspora members to engage in the country of origin? So in general, it's sometimes, as our evidence shows, it sometimes matters who promotes local economic opportunities. We should not neglect that often diaspora left the country, emigrated because of probably inefficient institutions, low level of public service, and then their institutions the same institutions who advocate for greater economic engagement. And this is a problem of credibility. So more facilitation, probably less intervention by the local political institutions is probably desired. Also, we should be realistic. Not so many economic opportunities are perceived by diaspora members often as, at least as per their views. So, for example, we don't have developed financial markets in our region, which is very important element if you want to attract capital. And diaspora members then decide, okay, if I want to invest, I will invest in real estate. I will invest in some sectors that will not also provide more benefits to the wider population. This is also the case. Interviews with those who decided to return and set up a business or both, of course, revealed some administrative problems. And there is, for example, an interesting initiative in Serbia, also supported by the UNDP and the government. It's called Returning Point. And this initiative was trying to and still trying to solve these administrative problems through, for example, for investment, for return, for getting citizenship or obtaining some permits. So it was basically some kind of one-stop shop model, trying to establish and maintain direct communication with diaspora members. And just like diaspora is not equally distributed across the host countries, diaspora members also are not equally relevant from the perspective of the country of origin. For example, in some villages in the Balkans, you have every second household has some relative in abroad and living abroad, some diaspora family members, and this is not the case in another. And those areas are very often poor, underdeveloped areas. So the third perspective and third aspect I would like to elaborate a bit is about future direction. So where should we go? I believe that, of course, despite some encouraging trends, and we should make this diaspora economic engagement policies more participative and especially from the point of view of involvement of diaspora members, some good practices, and trying to improve credibility through greater involvement of diaspora members. Of course, as we also had opportunity to hear, data collection and sharing information is very important, not only about diaspora, but also among diaspora communities, among diaspora associations abroad. There is an iPlatform, which is, for example, very interesting as SDC funded project for diaspora from Bosnia and Herzegovina that we found, and it works well according to my information. Promotion of good practices is very important. In Serbia, there is no so many people who knows that one of science technology parks in Kragujevac is actually initiated and realized by a guy who is a member of Austrian diaspora, Mind Park. There are many similar examples in the region. For some reason, maybe it's also the decision of the investor that they're trying to stay under the radar and to stay invisible. Finally, as a person who comes from the science community, I believe that scientific collaboration is very important, represents a huge potential, and those projects, there is one in Serbia, and also I noticed that there are some communities in Albania called Albania Tech who try to benefit from digitalization and digital initiatives, and I believe this is one of the opportunities. This is of course not sufficient. It is important to make these projects more visible, to maximize usage of the results for the benefit of local communities, local society, and also to include alumni networks. I think this is also underused potential use of, for example, group of people who are already connected, mutually connected, and who completed education at prestigious universities, and of course this is probably a chance for local development. And finally, I would say that I found also GIZ funded initiatives related to strengthening capacities of the state administration. I haven't heard about so many projects on that topic, and maybe this project didn't, reach all the potential benefits and spillovers, probably because of it is my personal view that it lacked maybe greater support of the local institutions in terms of mapping diaspora and in the host countries, and it was a limiting factor of their great success. But there are opportunities, for example, that local representatives benefited from people who are working in the state administration of a host country and are willing, even for free, to share their knowledge, to provide some capacity building support, or even in businesses, we often neglect some people in the middle management of important international companies who are I would say could be a source of knowledge and help us understand what is going on in international markets in large businesses. So I will stop here. Thank you for your attention and your patience and time.
Thank you, Mihail. So the floor for Alban.
Okay, thanks. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, good. Okay, hi everyone. Glad to be here. As usual, when you talk last of the three, there is a risk of repeating something, but I'll have to reshuffle some of the things that I wanted to say because some was already covered. So when looking at the causes of migration in Western Balkan countries, essentially one has to look at the economic development patterns of the region. And while the economies of Western Balkans have made some progress in improving economic and social outcomes over the past decade, both in terms of increase in per capita GDP or a significant drop in per capita poverty levels, still the region's development continues to lag significantly behind the other EU countries. And essentially this development gap with neighboring European countries constitutes a significant potential push potential. The labor market outcomes in the region, though they have improved over the last decade, still they are not at a satisfactory level. Essentially, the labor market is still has considerable structural constraints, low productivity, as evidenced time and again by different studies conducted in the region, both at the macro but also at the micro level, that hinder economic competitiveness. And I think the competitiveness of the region is a key word here, and which in turn negatively affect the employment but also wage levels and also encourage labor immigration. Similarly, in terms of educational system, it still struggles to produce needed skills. And when you compare to international benchmarks, the educational system in the Western Balkans essentially has produced relatively weak student learning outcomes across different occupational groups. And here just I can echo what Nermin said, that we need detailed data to see how this affects different sectors and different groups. Also, the business environment remains challenging, even though there was some improvement. It is quite cumbersome to navigate, and especially for smaller businesses, in the region. The foreign direct investment, which also is the diaspora is partly responsible for, was sizable. Still, it has relatively weak linkage with the local economy, which essentially restrains the potential for spillover effects into know-how and technology transfer in the region. And this kind of environment essentially lowers the potential for increased economic growth and job creation, and reinforces those push factors. And finally, there is a significant inequalities remain in the region. When you have under-resourced social protection, but also health infrastructure, expenditures on both are comparatively low, while on the other hand, out-of-pocket expenses, especially for health services, constrain citizens to access to quality healthcare. On the other hand, the pull factors are significant. The differences I just mentioned in terms of development with other Western European countries essentially also serve as pull factors, because there is high demand for labor in these countries, and also there have been a change over the last, especially over the last decade, in making it easier for people from the region to work in these countries. And just to illustrate that, I use the case of Germany here to showcase that the change in labor mobility policy in Germany after the Berlin process, and especially since 2016, has increased the number of people that from Western Balkan countries that had left the country. And these are the numbers from 2016 across all Western Balkan 6. In the upper panel, you see them in thousands. So essentially, on average, there were over 11,000 people per country per annum getting a work permit for Germany. And as a share of population, these represent on average for the whole region around 0.5% of population annually getting a work permit for Germany. These are data from German Federal Employment Agency. And the good thing is that these data can also be disaggregated at sector level to see in which sectors these people are leaving for, and also can produce or inform some policy making in countries of origin. So just to see the scale of the problem, we see that this trend is creating problems in domestic market. The institute where I work is also a data collecting agency, so we've been able to pick up this problem from businesses in the demand side. And in trying to look at a more detailed, sort of higher granularity, just last year we replicated a study that we did a couple of years back, looking at the labor market dynamics both from demand and supply side, and seeing the both potential for people to immigrate, but also looking at companies that are likely to lose staff due to immigration. And hopefully this can, in our view, produce some valuable policy implications. So if you look at the determinants of propensity to immigrate, what we found is that there are some factors which are significant across all types of specifications that we've made. So employment is an important determinant of people's propensity to immigrate. People living in rural areas, gender, and marital status. So essentially, single, a male, unemployed, and people from rural areas are more likely to leave. But we found strong evidence that effective active labor market measures have lowered the incentives of people to leave, which in our view also produces some actionable measures that can be taken in order to slow down this migration trend. Now we use the data from the supply side to mirror them with the demand side. And what we did is that we looked across all types of occupational groups and wanted to see where the biggest mismatches come from, so that we can sort of have a more informed sort of more information in terms of labor dynamics in Kosovo. And what we found is that the biggest mismatch in terms of expectations doesn't come from mismatch in expectation for wages, but they rather come from mismatching expectations for working conditions. And this has been found as an important or significant determinant that companies losing staff due to migration, those that have good working condition, have less chances of losing staff due to migration. So we think this also produces some important policy implications. Now, also sectors seem to be relevant, which again adds to the discussion earlier made by Nermin, that the more we have data to higher granularity, we can better devise policies and responses to this issue. It was discussed here quite a lot about the remittances that essentially they generate financial resources and support economic and social development in the region, and in a sense they serve as a safety net because they represent also a sizable share of GDP in all respective countries. However, there is a caveat to it. One, that this is a strong growth engine, but over a short run. The second is that diaspora provides demand for non-traded goods, which lowers the incentive to develop external markets, and in essence is creating what is called a non-traded bias in the economy. So essentially, there is higher demand for goods and services which are not tradable, which adds to the problem of structural problems that all Western Balkan economies have in terms of their trade deficit. So going beyond this development beyond remittances, essentially this calls for a change in the growth model of these countries, so less depending on external factors, and promoting a new growth model which essentially enhances competitiveness. What I said was the key word on my view in terms of how these countries can essentially move away from what they've been doing so far. And that would mean essentially making a better use of investments in education and healthcare, which are sort of more a long-term policies, but also increase investments in research and innovation by targeting efforts to change the production structure of the economy, as currently all the Western Balkan economies are net importers, so to say. So essentially, this is the remittances as they are now, just adding to the problem rather than mitigating it. But however, the research that I've just quoted here also provides some good insights in terms of immediate effects. So what can be immediately done in order to slow down the migration trends? And I agree, this is just one side of the coin. But because most of the mismatch is coming in expectations for working conditions, we see that this can be actionable. There are actionable measures that can mitigate this problem, and also investment in targeted and effective active labor market measures, which can lower the incentives of people to leave, but on the other hand, also the improvement in working conditions lowers the incentive to leave for these reasons, which essentially, as I said, seem to be significant in different exercises we've run and different specifications with the data that we collected, and as I said, across different age groups and different occupational groups. On the other hand, in terms of long-term, one essentially has to focus on these macro factors like education and health sector, which seem to be significant factors in pushing people away. Now, I know that no one ever complained that someone didn't talk too long, so I'll stop here and maybe I'll get some questions in the meantime.
Thank you very much, Alban. Thank you, Mihailo and Nermin, for sharing evidence-based observations and policy recommendations. And while I would like to remind participants to use the chat for questions addressed to our panelists, I would like to open the second part of this webinar, where we have well-selected group of observers whom we asked to reflect on policy recommendation of experts, real-life stories that Jona shared. I would like to introduce you with them. We have Besart Kadia, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from Albania, who is even responsible for economic diplomacy. Mila Tarovska. Mila now leads civil society NGO in North Macedonia. She used to be a Minister of Labor and Social Affairs in North Macedonia. So we are very grateful that two policymakers join our panel. I would like to introduce Rafael King, a friend and ambassador of Western Balkan, not only in UK community, but worldwide. He comes with a great expertise on migration, former director of Sussex Center of Migration, with quite notable research on migration, and Bashkim Misene, member of Federal Migration Commission in Switzerland, who at the same time deals with migrant integration at the municipality of Lausanne. Thank you for joining our panel, and by welcoming you, I would like to open the panel with a question. I take a keyword from Alban, who talked for actionable measures, short-term actionable policy measures, and midterm. I don't want to say long, because it's urgent. We need policies to respond to these challenges. So what would be your advice about short-term actionable policy measures which Western Balkan countries need to adopt in order to cope with already described evidence? So maybe I would like to start from Mila, since we have a lady in the panel. The floor for you, Mila.
Thank you, Vavona. Hi to everybody. Thank you for having me at this really important event. I hope that we will continue networking and discussing migration as something that is a challenging issue for Western Balkan, but also for the cooperation with the EU countries about our migration pool and push factors. I like how they analyze the numbers and how they compared with the GDP and how we are losing or we can gain the capacity in the region. And I would share, because I really want things to be practical. And me as a Minister of Labor and Social Policy, I was trying to establish a youth guarantee in our country with the Swiss development cooperation through the Slovenian model. And it was a really good story for North Macedonia. But our countries and our region, I think that we have a really issue with continuing and consistency in the policies that we are trying to implement, and having the midterm implementation, goals to see if they're achieved or no, and someone to try to create a good model of monitoring and evaluation of those policies. This is not happening, and still there is implementation, but we don't know how many of those young people that are employed through the youth guarantee are still in the country, or they're outside of the country. Are they in the region, meaning that the connections and data following it's not really on the level that needs to be. There are the few things that I want to recognize, to recommend that can be done, that we need to have standardized system for recognizing qualification. We say that we are opening the borders, that we are inviting our people, but still in the ministries of education, there are the systems of qualifications. And those qualifications and skill are not unified among the region. And this is the first step that needs to be done in the next period, if we want to have a clear and smooth movement of the people from one to the other country. The second thing is that there is no clear pathway for migration, including temporary or circular migration around. People are not really aware what are the procedures, how they can go and work in one company in Kosovo, and after that easily come back in North Macedonia. Why? Because there is no schemes that are supporting those people, meaning the social security schemes, they are not fully established, pathway is not clear, people don't know if they contributing to some regional scheme of social security or just a national one. What happened with the national one when you're working in Kosovo or in Serbia, and how you can continue after that contributing in the national one. All these mechanisms needs to be aligned, and we need to put them in practice if we want to have especially the circular migration schemes and benefits for the host and home country. The third also important one is integration policies, meaning that the countries needs to develop some policies that will include language training, cultural orientation, access to the social services, childcare services in the other country, where we expect our people to go, or we need to have also the same schemes for the people that we are expecting to come if we arrange some type of this type of schemes. If we want this process of integration to be more smoother. And the last but not least, because it's really important, especially countries as North Macedonia that are weaker than the other countries in the region in cooperation with economy development, we are not addressing the push factors, because if you have just a pull factors in the region from the bigger countries, more developed one, they grow easily and faster, and the people will just go there. But if you not prevent and you're not addressing the push factors, meaning all the job creations, salary increase, productivity, governance reform in the institutions, meaning that some of the countries will have a problem. And that's why when we are discussing about the regional migration and push and pull factors, definitely every country, before we are discussing about all these schemes and mechanisms as recognizing the qualification and joint schemes for social benefits, we need to discuss also the push factors and to address them very well in the country, and also to discuss what type of pull factors every country had for the other one. Those are just the 4 things that I want to address after listening the first panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mila. One would wonder what's the obstacle of putting in place such policies so it's easier from the perspective of civil society and the advocator to give such recommendations. But that's why we go to Besart from Albania. Besart is as well economist from the background. What would be your vision, your advice in terms of actionable policies in short and midterm? Floor for you, Besart. Please open the mic. You hear us? Okay, I think Besart had an issue, so while we give some time, okay, Besart, you have to open the mic. Okay. Okay. If you can open mic, not working. Okay, so let's give some time Besart to arrange the connection, and I just would like to go to Bashkim who can bring not only an international perspective, but even a local perspective. The life of migrants happens at the local level, at the community level, and it comes with a rich experience. What would be your recommendations, Vashki?
Well, hi everyone, everybody. I'm very glad to be among you, and especially I'm very happy to meet again Mr. King. I was participating at the IMISCO Congress in Amsterdam a few years ago, and of course with Nermin Noruch we have collaborated with him and with Valbona. So it depends. The recommendation regarding the local or even of a larger perspective for the countries who receive labor migrants from abroad. First of all, I think that for the Balkan countries, they could take this advantage of the Western experience to establish, I would say, public policies for integration and protection against racism. You know, it's very important to have a clear, I would say, legal framework from the beginning, and to encourage the integration, maybe middle and long-term integration of persons who come to work in a country, because you know, maybe the Philippines, of the people of maybe of Bangladesh, they think and that they are only for a few periods, for the short period in Kosovo or in Serbia or elsewhere. But however, I'm absolutely sure that a lot of among them that will stay there, because this is the universal rules, I would say, of the immigration. That's why it's very important to have a real public policies regarding this aspect. These integration policies are mainly articulated through integration measures, like of course the integration measures in the field of especially linguistic, cultural, civic learning offers. The apprenticeship of the language of the country of reception is very important, because it helps, of course, on the acceptance of the presence of the foreigners in the country. Of course, the other measures, I would say, are very important regarding the integration process, in the sense that you know, you have to facilitate, to improve the framework, I would say, for framework condition for integrations through promoting the access to education and the labor market, in order also to avoid any social dumping. Dumping social. I'm thinking in French. I'm sorry. And dumping, social dumping. It's very important also to inform the migrants about their rights. What are the rules of the country? How the country functions? What are the main values in the country? And of course, to be informed about their rights. It's a way also to protect them from abuses and from social dumping in the country in the country of destination. Of course, the counseling, I mean, the providing the good advice is not only for the people who work, but also for their relatives, and especially for the children, is also important. That's why, you know, the integration of foreigners, it's a very deep process, and of course you have to have a clear framework, but also to have a means, a budget for that. It's in the own interest of the country to invest very early on that. You know, you know the famous drama, famous, maybe you've heard the famous word of the Swiss dramaturge. He was saying, we bring arms, they were humans. So you import, you can provide labor force through for maybe for a short period, but you have to take in consideration for the fact that these are humans with their own complexities, and it's important to have this human dimension in order to answer to the needs of the economy. But the enterprises are interested to bring them, but as a collectivity, you have to think on that there are externalities that you have to take in consideration, even the answers, even if you answer to the needs of the economy. That's why I said at the beginning that the Western experiences can be very useful for the Western Balkan countries in order to avoid some mistakes, I would say historical mistakes, or some policies that were not really adapted to the real needs for the migrants, but also for the home country. And last but not least, it is also important to invest on the protection against the discrimination. Unfortunately, in the eastern countries, there was not this proximity between, for example, some regions of the world, because the Western Balkans do not have a colonies, so they don't have this colonial heritage and this proximity with some regions in the world. That's why it's important to work on that in order to inform the population and to put mechanisms to protect them from racism and other forms of intolerance, because the discrimination is a real obstacle to the integration of these persons in the Western Balkan countries.
Thank you, Vashtim, for pointing out the importance of social cohesion, especially on an important dimension of migration. I would like to come back to Vesart, if maybe just to check.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If you don't mind, hi everyone. I cannot use the camera unless if I'm using the microphone. I hope it's okay.
Okay.
Well, from the Albanian government's perspective, we are seeing at the moment a lack of labor force. So when we talk about migration, we can feel that while we're having a big number of tourists coming to Albania, we need workers to provide services. We're feeling the pressure now that most of the businesses, they're seeking migrants or workers from Asia. So that's just to say that migration is, Albania has become from a country that exported workers. Now we want to import workers, which means that every country faces its own challenges. It's a dynamic process of economic development. And what is interesting is that while Albania or the Balkan countries might be poorer than most of the Western Europe, actually Albanian taxpayers are training doctors from one of the wealthiest countries in Europe, which is Germany. So how do you come around that? So what we try to do is at least try to increase wages in most of the public sector. So in terms of cost of living and in terms of career perspective, Albania becomes competitive. And at the same time, what we try to do is stop, let's say, or at least make it difficult for students after they finish studies to go to work to Germany, unless they do 3 years work in Albania, in hospitals in Albania. So it might look a drastic measure or something which might it look as if you're hindering on human rights and freedom of movement, but at the same time, it's one of those challenges we're facing and most countries in the region will probably face in the future. Now, for 30 years, migration has been a topic. I mean, there have been many research papers, there have been many targeted policies and everything else. From our perspective, it's something that you cannot control with tailor-made policies. Of course, you can try and address some issues, but from economic diplomacy perspective, what we can do, what our approach is, we want to increase the level of foreign direct investment in the country. So how do you come around that? Well, you try to reform the institutions. You try to make the government less bureaucratic, less corrupt, or less make it more efficient, either through reforms or through introducing technology and digitalization in the process. That has been successful. Personally, I was involved in one of the biggest investment negotiations in the country, which was around $2 billion in the port of Douros. What we did is we became competitive in terms of taxes and everything else, but at the same time, it provides jobs. Now, it attracts and it gives, let's say, it changes the perspective also of local businesses, but at the same time, it gives a perspective, it changes the perception of the diaspora on how the country is changing. So in that regard, if you have a big investment or international brand or international companies coming to the country, then they know from people who live in America, Germany, UK, that if these brands are coming, if these big investments are coming in the country, maybe the country is changing for the better, the opportunities are there. So it's a macro approach, or not, rather than a micro, let's say, tailor-made policies that might influence on the future. One of the other aspects that we are changing is trying to, let's say, use the globalized approach to the economic chain of services. So we have put a lot of emphasis on the ICT sector, where we try to train students from an early age in schools. We also in coding. We've also changed the tax system, so the startups or companies that are involved in ICT are competitive, and usually it has resulted that now youngsters might want to live and work in Albania while providing services outside the country. So let's say for America and everything else. It's a dynamic experience, and overall also the political perspective of joining the European Union also gives, let's say, an impulse for people to think twice now for the future. So they see, okay, we'll have better standards in the future, we'll become part of the European Union, and let's say, sectoral policies in sectors where there is a tendency to migrate, which is agricultural or rural areas. We have increased, or we have tried to subsidize and also help in people from diaspora who come and open, let's say, agritourisms in the rural areas. That has been successful. There's more and more people who see that as an opportunity, coming back, renovating the old houses and going back to the agricultural sector and providing services, which helps to the circular economy within the community in the villages. And the farmers who are there now, they have a market and bigger prices, but that's as a result of different dynamics. So it's the number of tourists and the number of investments and everything else. So overall, from our perspective, I did enjoy it, and I mean, obviously, some of the I wouldn't like to repeat on the presentations, because I think they are very accurate on explaining the dynamics. But I think each country, even though overall we are trying to integrate each other in the open market. I mean, Open Balkans was one initiative, or the Berlin process. I think each country has its own sensitive and different, let's say, issues. I would say Albania now, and in the next 3 or 4 years, I think the number of diaspora who would come back to the country, there might be something that you also need to measure or look at, that it will increase. And our duty is to see how we can integrate them, or the sectors of economy where they can be most useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Besart. Last but not least, Professor King, on purpose I left you at the end, a little bit taking as well impressions of policymakers in Western Balkan and twisting it with your long experience on migration. What would be your advices and observations?
Okay, thank you, Valbona, so much. And coming at the end is a little bit difficult because you've all said so much already, and I really don't want to repeat anything. And I also feel that to some extent I'm here under false pretenses because I don't really engage with the policy frontier directly myself. I mean, I've been working on migration for many decades, nearly 50 years actually, mainly as a teacher and researcher on migration, providing research evidence, which can then be fed into the policy process. So this is really my stance on today's discussion, not so much to make policy recommendations, because quite simply, I don't feel I have the experience or the qualifications to do that directly. But maybe rather to provide a small number of broader reflections about what I've heard today, and going right back to the first speaker, first and second speakers in the first round, you know, who referred, I remember, to looking at migration and development as two sides of the same coin. And there's a kind of negative side to that coin, which is all about brain drain and exploitation and the predatory role of capital over labor on the one hand. And then if you flip the coin to the other side, you get a much more sort of virtuous as opposed to a vicious circle of migration, which is all about creating mutually beneficial situations between sending and receiving countries, and also for migrants themselves. So that feeds much more into the discourse which we've heard quite a bit about return migration, about remittances, and about diaspora involvement. So I suppose the big question is how to, in the case of the Western Balkans, how to flip the coin from the negative to the positive side. And that's a simplification to one extent, because in any migration scenario, there's a mixture of both positive and negative elements. But, you know, looking at the region from the outside, I do get the impression that it's more of a negative scenario at the moment. The negatives seem to outweigh the positives. I'm thinking particularly of brain drain. I'm thinking particularly of the way in which the dynamics of migration within the region have changed, so that we have not yet got from a situation in which we've made the transition from emigration to immigration. Sure, there is some immigration, but the net trend continues to be outwards, and you know, much of that outward trend is now more and more made up of highly educated people, rather than what one of the speakers referred to as a sort of brawn drain, as it was earlier on in the case of some of the countries going back to the 1960s. So I think that's the big challenge. And if I can refer now briefly to some of the research that I've carried out with my research partner in Tirana, Ilya Gadeshi, over the last what, five to 7 years, we have carried out, I think, 4 major research surveys. One is a survey on potential migration, which shows, again, as has been repeated here, that more and more people want to emigrate. So that's an upward trend, which in itself is extremely worrying. Secondly, we have done surveys of so-called scientific diaspora, which we narrowly define as people with PhDs or who are studying for PhDs abroad. Thirdly, we have done studies of Albanian students, both those students who are abroad and those students who are currently studying in Albanian universities and high schools. And fourthly, and most recently, these results were presented in a workshop in Tirana quite recently, we've done a specific study on the emigration of Albanian doctors, which actually the previous speaker was also referring to as a huge problem. And I'm not going to I obviously don't have the time to go into any kind of detail about those specific 4 studies, but if if there's one kind of generalization that I can make, and again, it picks up a point that was raised by a previous speaker, the drivers of emigration, particularly of these higher level groups, students, highly educated people, professionals, IT specialists, and so on. One of the drivers are not so much framed simply by income, but they're framed by working conditions. And one of the speakers, and forgive me if I forget exactly who that was, but it's the conditions of work. And as well as these surveys, which were online questionnaires, we also did follow-up interviews on a sort of face-to-face basis. And if we sort of a little bit deconstruct the broad narratives that come through, there are two kind of key phrases which resonate throughout the whole sort of hundreds, if not thousands, of survey responses and interviews that we've collected. One is this idea one is this notion of a normal life. It's a kind of trope of a normal life. If one is looking for a normal life, then you don't find it in the region. You really have to emigrate in order to achieve that normal life. And the second trope, if I can call it that, which is in a sense the other side of the coin, is that this is the phrase, there is no future here. So if I want to achieve my life ambitions of a good job and a satisfactory career and a nice lifestyle and a decent material level of well-being, then that's what I regard as a normal life, and that normal life can only be achieved outside the region. So that seems to be the large-scale challenge to rise to. Another very general point that I want to bring in here is that you may have seen that I think within the last few days, the latest round of the sort of world happiness surveys were released. These were national level surveys across most countries of the world. And the countries which tend to come out at the top tend to be the usual suspects pretty much every year, although they change a little bit. But they're countries like Finland, Canada, New Zealand, Denmark, Iceland. And it seems to me that those countries which repeatedly come at the top of the sort of world happiness ranking, firstly and most obviously, they have high levels of material well-being. So that's more or less a sine qua non, not non. Secondly, they have relatively high degrees of equality and egalitarianism. They're not hugely unequal societies. They're societies which are relatively socially compact and don't have enormous divisions between the rich, the wealthy, and the poor countries, the poorest elements of the population that you find, for example, in Latin America or some African countries. And thirdly, and I think this is the key point that I want to get to, they have high levels of trust in public institutions and government, and also high levels of social trust within the population itself. And it seems to me that here I'm trying to put my finger on a really key point which is it's a policy point, but at a rather large scale for the Western Balkan countries. What they seem to lack pretty much across the board in all countries, maybe more in some than the other, is this lack of trust, both in other people in the countries, unless you happen to be related to those people through tight kinship and familial and social networks. So low levels of social trust amongst the population as a whole, so everybody is suspicious of everybody else. And secondly, lack of trust in the government. So there's this pervasive narrative of everybody is corrupt, everybody is open to bribery. If you want to get something done, then you have to know the right people. And those kind of narratives simply don't apply in a country like Sweden. I've lived in Sweden for a year and a half, and even compared to the UK, Sweden has a much higher level of social trust within the population. So that seems to me a key level, a key thing to be actioned at a policy level. Let me just perhaps close, because time is moving. Let me just close with one final point, which again is a very general point, and this is the issue of scale. We've heard lots of interesting examples of diaspora mobilization and instances of return migration, investment in agriculture, and so on. But how are those going to be scaled up to make a really meaningful difference at a national level? And I think that question of scale becomes important as well. Okay, I'll stop there and allow time for questions from the broader audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor King. I would like now to, we have just one question on the chat, which is elaborated, it's Regis doing that, but maybe I would invite Alban to quickly elaborate about what are the measures in the domestic labor market through which incentives for out-migration would be enhanced. Alban.
Yep, thank you, Valmona. Well, I as I mentioned in a recent study that we did, what we try to do is to match both from the demand and supply side the different occupations, and wanted to see where do the biggest mismatches come from. And we used data on wages, and we've seen across occupations that there is not a very significant difference between the median wage in the sector for that particular occupation and the reservation wage of people to work for that wage. So we ruled that out. What we found as most significant one is mismatch in terms of working conditions. And that's what this sort of informed our recommendations for improvement in terms of working conditions. In essence, you have people throughout the region working either without contract or incomplete contracts. They are exposed to different safety risks. They work long hours. They work on weekends, which are not appropriately paid as prescribed by law. And we think that these can easily be addressed through empowerment of labor inspectorates. And also, what we found is a significant determinant of increasing people's propensity to leave is the ability to gain from to benefit from active labor market measures. And we've seen that as an effective measure, which essentially can be a short-term intervention or something that can be actionable immediately. Other measures essentially are longer-term measures, and whatever I say has a risk of oversimplifying it, but essentially we think that there is a lot to be done from our economy's perspective to increase or accelerate the growth of the economy, because as it stands, the economies in the region are growing, but the difference with the EU average is not significantly shrinking, and that in itself serves also as a pull factor, both as a push factor from outside as well. So in that sense, we said that the most immediately actionable measures could be related to working condition, which seems to drive a lot of people out. That also coupled with other factors which require more longer-term perspective and investments.
Thank you, Alban. I think we could address just one more questions coming from Snezhana, and I guess Bashkim is well positioned to answer that questions about policy measures or practices in Eastern European countries related to integration of immigrants, and who are the best positioned stakeholders to advocate for such policies. Bashkim?
Just can you repeat the question? Sorry, because the voice was.
Okay, so the Snezhana asks, since you somehow shared a little bit, what are some of the measures to integrate immigrants into the local context? So who are the best positioned stakeholders to advocate for policy measures through which immigrants are integrated?
Well, there are different stakeholders. Of course, the collectivities at first, the municipalities at the all happened at the local level. That's why, but we have to have a harmonious, I would say, public policies of the integration, because you can't, maybe you can be very advanced the local democracy, but if you have a legal framework that refrains the initiatives, that's why important to have a to have a harmonized policies regarding the immigration. But one aspect, one stakeholder are also the migrant themselves, the immigrants themselves, through the associations who are real partners in this process. And other stakeholders, of course, in parallel with the public collectivities, are also the enterprises, because they get the benefits from the I'm say importing labor forces, but it is also important to participate in this integration process through for example facilitating the trainings among inside the enterprise, but also to provide the different services for the immigrants who works in their enterprise. And of course, the integration process there are different stakeholders, but it was a huge debate in Switzerland, because the main political paradigm until the 18th, 19th was that it's up to immigrants to integrate them. Since the 19th, the collectivity, we have a legal framework, we have a real budget for the promotion of integration of the immigrants. And since several years, we recognize the importance of the migrant associations, NGOs, and of course, the enterprise, the private sector. But if I may abuse of my word, I would like also just to, on the same direction as said Professor King before, we have to overcome also this vision of the diaspora of migration only to the economic dimension, because there is a huge potential for also cultural influence, scientific exchange, political influence also in the Western Balkans through the actors from diaspora. And these are both side influences. So we have to take in consideration all this kind of dynamics. And the fact that we focus only on the economic aspects, in my opinion, it's we miss a lot of explanative actors of some behaviors regarding immigrants or immigration or immigration. Thank you.
Thank you, Vashkim. There are two questions, and really the last ones for Professor King. One relates to the lessons that Western Balkan countries can draw from, Western world, which is facing also significant challenges with the availability of labor forces, especially in the service, low to mid-income occupation, and this problem has deepened after Brexit. And there is another question from Regis about skepticism which was drawn about diaspora engagement, in particular regarding the impact of remittances. If you can, in a synthesized way, elaborate, Professor King. Your mic, please. You will tell me that I need another webinar for that. I know. Please, Professor Russell, could you just unmute the mic?
Yeah, so the first question was about the lessons that the Western Balkan countries can draw from so-called more advanced countries, thinking particularly of those in Europe. And I think, I mean, potentially, although I don't want to be too kind of historically deterministic, but potentially the Western Balkan countries are following, if you like, the rest of the Southern European countries, both in terms of their sort of general economic structure and also in terms of their migration trends, one might predict. Because if you look what happened, if you take the two countries which are close by, which are Greece and Italy, then of course until the 1960s, those countries were countries of massive emigration of the kind of scale that we also see in the Western Balkans today. And so what happened to those countries, and also Spain, Portugal, and even some North African countries, Morocco and so on, is that there was a transition towards from net emigration to net immigration. And that transition was made up of a number of individual components. One was return migration. A lot of Greeks and Italians came back to their countries when they saw that the countries were developing industrially and touristically. So one was return migration. Part of that transition, that net transition was, of course, falling emigration. And then the other component was new immigrants coming in from other countries. And this is a kind of intertwined process. So it's not as though, you know, at one point a country is an emigration country and then the next year it becomes an immigration country. These things overlap in time. And this, I think, picks up another point that one of the speakers made with regard to Albania, which of course is the country that I know best within the region. And that is that, you know, Albania now is drawing in supplies of immigrants from Bangladesh, Nepal, India, and so on. And, you know, that in a sense is a natural process. It's part of the global dynamics of migration, that you have in some countries simultaneously emigration and immigration. And that's how the global labor market and the rewards that you get for different kinds of jobs are globally structured. So, I mean, just to take a simple example, which comes from our research on medical doctors, German doctors migrate to Switzerland, creating a deficit in the German medical profession. So, you know, Germany then opens up and facilitates and encourages the recruitment of doctors from the Western Balkans. And that, of course, opens up a big question of which again was referred to by one of the speakers of you know, the injustice, the regional global injustice of that a poor country like Albania is providing skilled labor almost as a form of development aid to a rich country like Germany. And you know, that is the pernicious side of the brain drain syndrome, of course, which I still think is a major global problem, although some economists have tried to move away from that and talk more about brain circulation and the so-called beneficial brain drain and so on. Valbona, I think you also asked me to reflect on very briefly on Brexit. I mean, I could talk for hours on Brexit, but I will just share with you one or two sort of reactions. And one, I suppose one reaction demonstrates the power of economics and the labour market over political rhetoric. So one of the reasons why the UK population voted to leave was because of this fear over immigration and the need to so-called take back control of our borders. So what happened after Brexit? Did immigration fall? No, quite the reverse. It went up. It went up by a factor of 2 or 3 times. Just before Brexit, the UK was recruiting or was having a net migration of between 200 and 300,000. The most recent figures that have been released show that net annual migration is now 700,000. So, you know, despite all the fear mongering about mass immigration and uncontrolled migration, which was part of the rhetoric around Brexit. Nevertheless, the reality, even of those same people who argued for taking back control of our borders, and I'm referring here to people like Boris Johnson and so on, the reality is that those very same politicians have opened up the floodgates, if you like, of migration, not so much from within the EU, but now from countries like India and Bangladesh and many other countries, the Philippines and so on. So in many cases, I mean, this is probably getting a little bit away from the real theme of today's webinar, but I mean, I do want to point out, based on the British experience, the disconnect between what politicians say and the reality of how migration actually happens and needs to happen in order to satisfy the global demand and the regional and national demand for labour market demand for immigrants, which is one of the main structural things that drives migration.
Thank you very much. I apologize. We are really at the end of the webinar. I just take at least some more minutes because we started a little bit late. Thank you very much. We take, at least personally, I see that politics is about policies, but it's as well about knowledge and innovative ideas. Some of them were shared here. And I would like just to quickly pass the floor to Albina, who is a youth and market system expert, whom we asked from the beginning to hear and share with us as a wrap-up 3 main takeaways from an advocacy perspective. So what we should advocate for and what development actors like development partners, including Helvetas and our network, should focus on the future. Floor for you, Albina.
Thank you, Valbona, for this great introduction. So the main takeaways, what we have noticed today and what we discussed is that migration is still a huge trend in the Western Balkans, and the push factors are still very strong. What we heard also from participants is that different governments are taking different measures in improving this governance quality and strengthening the institutions. However, from advocacy and policy level, what actions can be taken forward, they involve long-term and short-term solutions. In long terms, like increasing investments towards education and healthcare, and as well as economic development, because what was discussed is that economic interests should lead in the policy making, while in addition to these long-term solutions, also investments in research and innovation were mentioned. However, there were also recommended some short-term policy actions like standardization of qualifications so that we have harmonized qualifications in the region. It was mentioned also to implement some local domestic labor market measures, improving working conditions, the increase of salaries, working more with labor inspectorate, and also the strengthening integration policies for immigrants. Our colleagues also mentioned that we should invest a lot in evidence, especially when it comes to diaspora engagement. We should have these digital solutions and evidence-based policies related to engaging diaspora. So these are very brief and short, just like you asked.
Thank you, Albina, and we wish you as well a lot of success with the events of iProject in Kosovo, which is really a role case, I would say, when it comes to youth engagement and building skills. Yes, by really thanking all of you for the great contribution, and you stood along the 2 hours with us. I would just like now at the end to inform you what will be the next stop, and the next topic where Regional Advocacy Network will dive through with experts, practitioners, private sector, civil society, and public sector representatives. So Sheila from Bosnia will share with us what's next. not just about migration, but about another interesting and hot topic in Western Balkan and broader. So Sheila, the floor for you.
Thank you. So my task is today just announce and invite you to the face-to-face meeting of the upcoming face-to-face meeting of the Regional Advocacy Network. I'm international team leader of the project Civil Society Support in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and our project will host this event in the second half of October in Bosnia and Herzegovina, most possibly in Sarajevo. So this event is planned to build around the topic of advocacy in shrinking democratic space. So far, we plan a 2.5 days event. The first day, we would like to organize our annual policy forum, which would be for you a side event combined with key intervention of few of network members dealing with advocacy work, policy dialogue, in this context of democratic backsliding among fragility and conflict. The focus is aimed to be on collaborative frameworks, on resource mobilization and sustainability strategies, which serve all in all inclusive democratic governance. So we really hope and trust, and we are working on that this will also serve very well, not only good governance project, but also private sector and vocational education projects, which are very well represented in the broader Helvetas regional portfolio. So we do expect meaningful dialogue, collaboration, and actionable outcomes also for us. On the second day is our deep poll hack is planned. On the third day, a strategic workshop on the future of the Regional Advocacy Network. So the question is what you should do now. I would like to ask you to save the date. So second half of October this year will take place this event. I would like to ask you to spread the word. So we expect 2-3 participants from Helvetas project together with their partners. However, also interested other parties beyond this circle are welcome too. I would like to ask you to count with the usual cost, okay? So participants travel to BIH, the per diems you are entitled to, and accommodation cost in the country. However, other costs like networking breaks, social and cultural events, relationship building events are covered by us. I would like to advise you to reach out to us to invitation letter if you would need a visa. Okay, so we are eager to help and assist you, and we please count and plan with 2 further introductory webinars, which already will bring us into this topic and introduce us. Thank you so much. Valbona, you're muted.
Yeah.
Muted.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you to all of you. Hope it was inspiring. You take some ideas and turn these ideas into action. Don't forget, advocacy works. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.